We're back, baby! Woo! It's good to be here again. How you doing over there, Russ?
Yeah. Doing all right, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's been a month. August 9th was our last
That's right,
upload, and now this one's going up on, September 12th, I guess, in the West. September 13th in Japan.
Yeah, been about a month.
Yeah, and it's been quite a lot of listening. I took the opportunity to listen to a few operas as we were going, because they take some time. Some new things that came down is, first of all, the Gramophone Awards shortlist was announced in classical music. This is England's or Great Britain's the British magazine Classical Music Awards, and I generally like this one because they tend to pick really good things, although it does tend to be a little England heavy. Not really that. They're not really that much. They're not as bad as the Grammys are with putting like all American things on there. But I was looking through that list and definitely want to talk about that. I was thinking, of doing something. We were both thinking about doing something about the Gramophone Awards sometime soon before they announce the winners. But they're announcing the winners on September 22nd, and there's no way we're going to listen to all 66 of those recordings. 72 if you count the new category, what is that? The Dolby Atmos category, spatial audio or whatever they called it.
That sounds terrible.
I read about it. I'm kind of not terribly interested in it. You'd have to kind of.
Brings me back to what was that, Earthquake and Sense Around or some gimmick like that, right? Where the seats shook in the theater or something back in the 70s.
Back in those days, though, they had a lot. They could put 1 million speakers in the movie theater to make it sound really amazing. But now they're kind of trying to create this illusion of surround in your headphones.
In your earbuds?
I can't. Yeah, it's to me, that's just stereo.
Just buy better speakers.
Yeah, it's just stereo. Well, I don't like when the sound from the original recording is manipulated to be something else, It's always bad. Yeah, let me kind of explain my take on audio to, me and Russ are a little different on this, but my basic approach is I want to hear what the engineer put on the tape. Okay, so if it's a super audio recording, I'm going to want to hear the super audio quality. Okay, and I want to say I have a surround like the 5.1 in my house, but I want to say it's not necessary to hear the surround. It doesn't really add all that much. There's a lot more space. It opens up the space a bit, and I find that kind of exciting because I can hear the individual parts. There's no need for it, but the engineer did make a 5.1 surround sound recording, and I want to hear what he did, what he decided, or she. It's usually he, though. Let's in classical music. Let's just say it. I want to hear what he thought or she thought the sound should be. So I'm always interested in that. I'm kind of like that in video too, in Blu-ray. If something was mastered to 4K video, I want to see it in 4K. I don't want to see just the Blu-ray. I want to see what they did, what they intended. Intentions are big with us classical music people, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I'm more of the 2-channel purist myself. I don't need a subwoofer or a surround.
Yeah.
I just need
we have
2
an
good
excellent
speakers.
Stereo there too, so that's part of it.
Yeah, that helps out. And
you really don't need. I will stand by that though. You don't need more than 2 speakers. I mean, it's all there.
Should be. Yeah, if all the imaging is right and the recording's good.
Yeah,
the equipment is up to speed. You should be all right. Well, I'm happy in this. When we left off a month ago, I had a long list of new releases that I was waiting to come out on streaming. The way things are these days with the record companies, they'll have something of upcoming release without a hard date, and then the dates are so different for when the disc goes on sale in various countries. And the streaming dates can be very different. And I had a list of more than 20 things I really wanted to hear, and none of them were available. I was really frustrated. But now, almost all of them are there now. And so I've got a long green-lighted list of things to work on, plus some more upcoming things. So now we're ready to roll with lots of material for the foreseeable future. So I feel kind of wound up and ready to go with jazz things.
Yeah, I've got a backlog of classical things that could probably last us until Christmas, which we intend to go to uninterrupted and beyond, possibly, depending on circumstances, of course.
Special episodes in there too. As far as regular episodes go,
I think we're going to do a special Gramophone Awards one. We won't necessarily hear all the recordings, but I want to talk about all the recordings. I have an idea for like a Christmas classical for this year, because I have a few things I want to recommend for that came out over the course of this year or last year. Yeah. And maybe a few more interviews. What do you think?
We'll get some interviews. I got some ideas. We'll see. We've got some interesting 3 interview episodes too. If you haven't checked those out, check those out. I think we can get some more interesting things coming up. Yeah. Right. And so I think it'll be a good fall for things to listen to and new surprises too.
Yeah.
And,
now I mentioned that I have all like a backlog of classical stuff, but there's going to be a lot of good things coming out in September, October, November as well. So yeah, it's going to, it's just December, January. It lets up a little bit, February as well, but, it's kind of,
we'll keep rolling.
We're not going to get them all in. There's so much good music. It's been quite a year that way. It's been a very good year for me. I've got to say.
Yeah. And so let's see. We left off. This will be episode 27 then.
Yeah.
Regular episode 27 of Adult Music podcast with music for the mature mind. Before we get into this week's selection, I want to remind our listeners that in the episode description here, you'll find links to Spotify and Apple Music for all the music that we'll discuss. Also, at the top of the description is a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, where you can follow us at username Adult Music Podcast. And you can listen to the podcast there. If you like, we use Deezer for our music streaming listening because we like the selection and the sound quality. Wherever you're listening to us, if you don't see the full description or list on your app, just come on over and check us out on our host, Podbean, where you'll find all the links and description easy to read. Some of the apps and other hosting sites don't really include all the links so clearly, I've noticed, but Podbean has everything the way that I make it easy to follow when I upload it. And then if you enjoy the podcast, please do follow us or subscribe on whatever app or platform you're listening to. And if you take a minute to give us a ranking or write a review, it helps us get listed in the browsing category recommendations. And that helps us grow our audience and get new listeners, which we're always happy to have. And then in addition, if you have anything above that you'd like to let us know directly, contact us with some comment or questions. So we'd be happy to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, that's all one word, @gmail.com, and we'd be happy to hear from you. So drop us a line.
Yeah, you can see that email address on Podbean. It's written at our host site there. I also want to mention that if you subscribe to Deezer and you follow us on Deezer, you can find out what we're going to talk about in the next episode a week early, because we share to really all of everybody following what we're going to talk about next week, so you can hear it in advance, and then you can listen to us talk about it.
Yeah, I mean,
knowing what it is.
I know you said, is your brother, right?
My brother Richard.
Checks out the,
shout out to Richard. I know he's listening. I know his daughter Brianna's listening too. Okay.
Hey,
Hi,
Brianna
Brianna.
And Richard, thanks for listening. But yeah, I mean, I suppose you could listen to the music first and then listen to us blab about it, or the other way. If something sounds interesting, then you could check it out. But we usually by Monday afternoon after we upload the podcast, we're already talking about what we're going to do the next week. And I try to get, that full playlist up by Monday or Tuesday at the latest on Deezer. So you can, check out the music 1 week early if you'd like to. Yeah. So it's there. And we picked up a couple extra Deezer followers too. and happy to see that. So
have we really? I didn't even see that.
There's a couple more there.
Well, a few people know what we're going to talk about. Actually, no, I didn't post next week's yet. By the time this episode is up, they'll
by the
they'll
time this is up,
there.
by tomorrow evening, I'll have the new playlist up so you can check out what's coming up for the next episode.
Right. Okay. Also, before we start with the classical music, September 11th just passed, and I know most people think of that as the anniversary of the terrorist attack on New York, but one of the things I think about is for that day is Arvo Pärt's birthday. The Estonian composer Arvo Pärt, who is the most performed contemporary classical music composer. He does a lot of religious music, like Orthodox Russian church music, and some really gorgeous instrumentals as well. Very still and just beautiful. He just turned 86 years old, so happy birthday to Arvo Pärt. We will be talking about him, his music in coming weeks, maybe within a month or something like that. So if you don't know who he is, you're in for a nice treat. Okay.
Even though he's Estonian, I give him the all-American toast and salute here, as this episode will certainly
the almost all-American toast and salute. I think our episode today is called Almost All-American. Like we were almost there. We just didn't make it.
Almost. And I spent the last month, the longest that I've spent in the States in a long time. Yeah. And I felt that I was almost American again, but not quite.
Not quite. Everybody's different now, right?
Yeah, it's a different country than I left, and that's a whole nother story. But
let me kind of say something about that, because I am I think I've mentioned before, an Italian American, and I've often my let's see, I know that the Vezzuto family, my father's family, immigrated to the U.S. in around 1901. All right, and one thing I kind of think about is I've been to Italy and I've met some of my relatives there. And one of the things I notice is that when people immigrate from one place to another, they preserve the culture that they left. Okay, so there's a lot of like old things, but when you go back, they didn't preserve anything. Time just went on, right. And these people have become modern people. So if you really want to know what say Italy was like 50 or 100 years ago, you can go to an Italian American's house, because they preserved a lot of customs that really don't exist anymore. And I'm kind of wondering if you felt like going back to America was sort of similar, like it kind of moved on and you just sort of remember an older way of things.
Yeah, I feel that in some ways. Of course, with your family, things get sort of fossilized, and so you see those things that don't change too much. And at the same time, in the larger culture, things have really moved on. Just small things like going shopping or, anything that's out in public is very different from how you remembered it.
Right.
So I always get those big contrasts between family and public life. And then just the general vibe of, people. And, plus we're not so young anymore. And as you get older, the time goes by quickly. And, you find all these sort of contrasts between who you are now and who you were. And then where you came from, and then your idealized versions in your mind of that. And, certainly there's those type of things. But I think, as you say, the sort of immigrant experience sort of became a snapshot in America, probably around the world in other countries too, but certainly in America. And those traditions were preserved in people's lives. And probably the place they came from has moved on. But it's an interesting mix of things to think about. And I had a lot of time to think about it while I was back there. So, anyway.
Not only is time moves faster when you're older. And by the way, if you're curious about that phenomenon, why that happens, there's an excellent book about it. Please read Time Warped by Claudia Hammond. It kind of explains the whole psychology behind why time moves so much faster when you're older and stuff. It's really interesting. Okay, so Time Warped by Claudia Hammond. I will recommend that to you.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I had something else. Not only that, but time. We live here in Japan. We've mentioned before, and things change so fast in Japan. It's every 2 or 3 years. It just feels like everything around you is completely different.
Some things,
Yeah, well, certain things like the things tourists come to see, like the temples, and they're there forever. They're always the same. But now, in Japan's like attempt to not have you deal with another human person ever, in convenience stores, there's no, well, the cashier is there, but they have like a sort of cash machine that you kind of feed money into, like you're they ring up the bill, and then you have to put it into the machine and push all these buttons to pay for something. And the next step is just to take the cashier out of the process. He's just going to be gone, and I guess you're just going to walk in there, buy something, and leave. I feel like it's very impersonal. Not too happy about it. I don't know. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, we're becoming detached from other humans and contact.
Not good, people. Although I tend to be like it's a loner type anyway. I kind of like being by myself. I'd much rather listen to CDs in my house than go to a concert, which is kind of weird because the music I listen to, mostly classical music, really came out of gatherings. People would go out to hear music, to hear people play music. It was all about being together. And even the string quartets from the classical era, the era of Haydn and Mozart, when those composers wrote string quartets, they wrote them for families who would play them in their houses.
Right.
And that doesn't happen anymore. It's all for professional players now because nobody really plays like that anymore.
In a full spectrum, the shared nature of music has been really sort of extracted from the way music is played and experienced in a modern time. But let's hope that through the podcast we're sharing.
Because if you're a musician, you learn from other people playing with other people. So because they know things you don't know, and
but the
you
technology,
on something, and they pick it up from you.
I think there's new ways we can share things, and obviously, we've got people around the world listening to us, and hopefully discovering new music they may not have found before. So we can concentrate on the good aspects of the technology and environment with this. So, I think there's some positives to the new technology too. And I hope that other things get back to more normal human interaction in the near future that we can see.
I don't know. I think we might be heading towards that transhumanism that sci-fi writers write about. So we're going to be half robot and half human soon.
AI composed things we'll be listening to. Half of it sounds like that anyway in the pop music, but
oh well. Yeah, well, you still have classical and jazz. This is one good thing. If we can manage to make this a living, somebody had mentioned on a podcast I was listening to, AI, they can get it to maybe do a lot of things, but they're not going to get it to host podcasts. So I think we won't be replaced. We won't be replaced because we're personalities.
No pithy comments from the computer.
You're right. No pithy comments. No jokes. They're not going to be, Anyway. All right, off we go. This week's classical music selections, and they are almost all American composers. And they are, well, no, they're almost all American performers, too. This is not, they're not all American either. My first choice this week is Randall Goosby. He's a violinist, and his album is called Roots. This album is released on the Decca label, and it features Zhu Wang, Chinese pianist from China, Hunan, who Goosby met at Juilliard, and the composer Xavier Dubois Foley. I hope I said that name right. I imagine he says it although he might not. Xavier Dubois. He might say Dubois because W-E-B Dubois. Okay. He might be named after him. Xavier Dubois Foley on double bass. I'll say Dubois because I'm guessing that he's named after W.B. Du Bois. On double bass in his work, Shelter Island. Okay. Randall Goosby is from San Diego, California. Okay. And he is, now the important thing is his album is called Roots. He has a black father and Korean mother, it says here. So he's a mixed race, and here he is specifically digging into the roots of his African-American side, his father's side. Incidentally, it says he has a Korean mother, but his middle name is Mitsuo, and that's a Japanese name. I'm kind of wondering what the story is behind that. Very interesting. So he's focusing on black composers on this record, and also composers who admired black musical forms, namely Gershwin and Dvorak, Anthony Dvorak. Okay, so on this album, we start out with a duet between Goosby on the violin. I should have mentioned. I hope I mentioned he's a violinist. Okay, and Xavier Dubois Foley on the double bass. He's a composer and also a double bass player. And we hear Dubois Foley's Shelter Island. Okay, Foley is 27 years old and native of Marietta, Georgia, in USA. Not Georgia, Russia, Georgia, USA. Okay, and this piece is really written for him and Goosby to play. They met each other at the 2010 Sphinx competition, and Goosby won first prize there at 13 years old. Boy. And then they met again next year at the Perlman Music Program on Shelter Island, and that's, I guess, this piece is a memory of that. Shelter Island is in Suffolk County, Long Island, in New York, by the way. Okay. The opening of this piece, it starts out with the violin and the bass playing together, and it reminds me of the mechanical repeating phrase that opens Ravel's duo for violin and cello. Did you pick that up? Do you know that piece, Russ? The Ravel?
I've heard it before. Yeah.
Yeah. Right away, it just kind of got me thinking of that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I like this one a lot.
Yeah, it's not mechanical sounding here. It's pretty much soulful, but it starts out in the same sort of repeating way that the Ravel does, but then it sort of opens up. This work sets the tone for the entire program. It's a very soulful piece, and this entire CD is going to be very soulful.
Yeah.
Execution
really
is excellent, and the interplay is great too.
It's a really nice bass work on the Shelter Island. I mean, obviously this is a showcase for Goosby's violin, but
well, it's for both of them, really.
Here, because later the piano takes a major part in accompaniment, but Foley's bass here is really enjoyable. So I thought that was a lot of fun on the Shelter Island composition.
Yeah, this piece is well worth hearing. It's really enjoyable. The interplay between the two musicians is fantastic. Just the two lines kind of playing off each other, really fantastic. It gets into this bluesy melody and then the Ravel sounding mechanical theme. I keep calling it mechanical. It's mechanical in the Ravel piece, but not quite here. But it reminds me of that Ravel piece. Duo for violin and cello, if you want to hear that, by the way. It's really great. I really love this piece. It's a great opening. Shelter Island, check it out. Okay, next. Composer, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson. These are three pieces for solo violin called Blues Forms. Now, the title, it's the word blue, and then there's a slash and an S. So the idea being that blue, so I guess blue notes or blue feeling, and then blues, the musical form, the blues. Okay, so blues forms for solo violin. Please, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson is not to be confused with Samuel Coleridge Taylor, who we'll hear his music later. Another black composer whose music we should know better. He's British though. Coleridge Taylor Perkinson is American. In fact, Perkinson's mother named him after the earlier British composer. He's named after Samuel Coleridge Taylor. So his first name, I guess, is Coleridge Taylor. Boy, that would be awkward. I guess he had a nickname. Okay, Perkinson was a 20th century composer, born in 1932, died in 2004. He wrote in many genres, including classical composition, film music, and jazz. And he also collaborated with Marvin Gaye and Harry Belafonte, so he's been around.
Wow.
In some of the classic ears there. Okay, Blues Forms is dedicated to the violinist Sanford Allen, who was the first African-American member of the New York Philharmonic. There are a lot of firsts on this recording, or a lot of references to firsts among black Americans. Okay, let's see. The three movements are very brief, but a fair amount of emotion is ejected into them. The booklet note tells me, I read the booklet note in the CD, that the work has elements of Baroque counterpoint, black folk music, and American Romanticism. American Romanticism would be I guess, 19th century, what would you call it? Just popular song, I guess. Okay, the American take on the Romantic era in Europe. The first movement is called Plain Blues with the slash, okay? It's a deeply heartfelt piece. And Goosby, again, he's a fantastic violinist. He puts the emotion across beautifully, reminding us that blues comes from pain, and we hear a lot of that pain in this movement. The second movement, Just Blues, again with the slash blue slash S, is more tranquil in tone with muted tones and pitch and impressive double stopping by Goosby. In fact, we're going to hear him double stopping impressively in a lot of music on this album. He's really excellent. The third movement, Jet and Blues, has more impressive double stopping as the piece moves on, ends on an impressive high double stopped chord with a pizzicato to send us off. Very, very nice set of works. At this point, you start to realize that Goosby isn't your average classical violinist. He gets the blues and jazz really well. He understands that space is needed to put this music across, and he leaves plenty of space in these works, all of them really. So this is really a fantastic performance all the way through.
Yeah.
Okay, next
this one I thought it was somewhat interesting. The first two movements I was kind of thinking about, but then the third one really hooked me. So the Jet and the Blues, it pulled me in, and I really enjoyed that one more. I think when you come, blues, to me, the best blues of a type should be sort of simple and honest, so that it's very open. And when you sort of come at it in a classical angle, and there's too much to think about, I sort of think,
it's not the blues anymore.
It's not the blues. But I thought, it didn't, no fault of Goosby's. It's sort of in the composition. I was trying to figure out, okay, what's really, being aimed at in the compositions. And then once I got to the third movement, then I could get more of an emotional nature from it. And then I felt that Goosby really got hooked into that one too. So that really sort of cemented it to me in the final movement there.
Okay. I actually liked this one from the beginning. I was pretty impressed by his playing throughout, really.
Well, I like his tone a lot. Because, as I've said on previous episodes, where we had very heavy violin based music, violin can really get on my sort of nerves. It gets the hair standing up, and so it really depends on the player's tone. And he has a really rich tone that's good, and he doesn't have. And there's a couple pieces here where he gets in that upper register, and I'm thinking, okay, am I going to have to reach for the volume control and crank it down? But mostly not. He keeps that really rich, and he doesn't get into any sort of abrasive squeakiness on his playing. And throughout, whatever register he's in, he has a really nice phrasing too. And so it sort of has these rounded edges, even when he's playing difficult passages, a very lyrical style that he has, for a young player too. So I found, for me, especially a violin featured recording, I'm ready to have this sort of high register fatigue even early on, but I didn't get that in this recording at all. I found it, easy to listen to.
Right. My whole experience with the violins, I dated a violinist long ago. So
me too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I kind of, I don't know, I guess I kind of got, it's really funny because I noticed that most of my violin recordings are by women violinists. And I kind of wonder if that's not saying something about, how I'm still thinking about this person, so I don't know.
Might be a therapy session for that or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe my whole massive classical CD collection is just one big therapy session.
It's a string thing, yeah.
Oh man. Oh well, there it is. I laid it all on the table there. Yeah. Okay. All right. By the way, if anyone wants to start a Mike's, a podcast where you want to explain my whole psychological my state or something like that, be my guest. I'd love to know what's wrong with me. Okay. All right. Anyway, onwards. 4 tunes from Gershwin's opera Porgy and Bess follow, arranged by Jascha Heifetz, of all people. You can kind of hear the Heifetz influence in this. And this is the first time we hear Zhu Wang on the piano, Wang being her family name. Or his family name. It's a man. Jeez. Okay. That's pretty bad. Bad mistake there. Okay, Zhu Wang. His family name is Wang. Okay. All right. This is the first time we're hearing Goosby in familiar repertoire on this album. And he has an appealing way with this repertoire. He and Wang give the jazz melodies a lot of space to breathe, and this really impressed me because I already, from the previous set of works, I knew that Goosby had the jazz in him, but Wang plays these really, really well. He's got a really good jazz feel in these pieces, which rather surprised me.
Nice phrasing here. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
These Gershwin pieces, so it all comes down to me how they're going to be interpreted, and that's all dependent on the phrasing. And yeah, I thought it was really good, excellent phrasing and interpretation of it.
Yeah, the 4 tunes they do is Summertime, A Woman is a Sometime Thing, It Ain't Necessarily So, and Bess, You Is My Woman Now. And I wrote that there's a beautiful moment in It Ain't Necessarily So where the melody is played on the violin's harmonics that really kind of got me. Mm-hmm. And he only does it once, and then it's gone like magic, and he doesn't play it again. So you're left with that memory of this amazing thing that you heard. Goosby tosses it off so effortlessly that it made me catch my breath. I liked it a lot. Okay, nice arrangement by Heifetz there. And the faster scat section in that piece doesn't lose any of its jazziness. It's really good, not least because of Wang's playing. He's really fantastic. So I like this accompanist as well. All right, next we get into some black American composers who are getting a bigger sort of profile these days. Their music is being played more often. The first is William Grant Still, and he was a major figure in American music, especially in American, I guess you could say American classical music, because he was born in Mississippi, grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he's often referred to as the dean of African American composers. Now, his music has been recorded really, I remember recordings coming out in the 80s, but not very many. They were almost like just sort of like these little teases that never really kind of went on to anything else. And he wrote a lot of music. He lived from 1895 to 1978, and he's considered to be part of the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s and 1930s. This was a time when there was a big art movement, not just in music, but painting and sculpture and all sorts of things like that. And in fact, these particular works by Still have to deal with some of the artists from the Harlem Renaissance. William Grant Still had a lot of firsts. He was the first African American to conduct a major American symphony orchestra, the first to have a symphony performed by a leading orchestra, the first to have an opera performed by a major opera company, and the first to have an opera performed on television. Okay? The first black American composer, African American composer. His first symphony, the Afro-American Symphony of 1930, was the most widely performed symphony composed by an American, any American, until 1950. I actually don't know what took its place. Probably, I don't know, maybe something by Bernstein, but I don't think he was, I don't know what he was doing at them. Yeah, I'll have to look that up. Okay. Still composed over 200 works, and we've heard hardly any of them. Here we get the Suite for Violin and Piano from 1943, so that's during the war years. The entire work, this is not a well-known work. Okay, he's got a few works that are fairly well-known. This is not one of them, and it's nice to hear it here. The entire work is nicknamed Mother and Child after the title of the second movement, and each of the three movements is named after a sculpture. The first one, Richmond Barthay's African Dancer. The second movement is named after Sergeant Johnson's Mother and Child sculpture, and Augustus Savage's Gamin, Gamin, sculpture is the third movement. You can look at pictures of these three sculptures online. All three sculptors were major players in the Harlem Renaissance, the period from 1918 to the mid-1930s. Okay, this African dancer starts with imposing octaves on the piano, some quick scatty figuration in the outer sections, and a slower bluesy middle section. And again, Wang and Goosby are magnificent here, especially with the multiple stopping and quick figuration that Goosby has in his part. The slow movement, Mother and Child, is the longest also, and it's tender, searching. The melody reaches a powerful peak in the high register. Goosby's playing is very moving here, so he's able to really put that emotion across. And he makes this movement in particular memorable. I mean, this is the one you're going to remember. I guess that's generally the case with this piece. He creates some breath-catching moments of beauty in the score via his pacing and dynamics. Like, he sort of times things out really well that you're kind of like, wow, okay. It's a lovely movement. And the relatively brief gamin movement has an insouciant quality to it, like no cares in the world, full of bravado, and a tinge of jazziness in the melody. This is probably the best ever recording of these three movements or of this work. Okay. Now, if you've been following the American music recently, Florence Price, another Black American composer, has really come to the fore lately. A lot of her music was almost lost in the demolition of her house. After she died, the people working on the house kind of found all of these scores, and I guess they were saved before the house was demolished. If it was demolished, I'm not really sure what would eventually wind up happening to it. In this case, we're hearing just short pieces by her Adoration for violin and piano, and her two Fantasies for violin and piano. We will hear a longer work by her later in today's program. Okay, now she's really most famous for her symphonic music and concerti. They've been widely played in recent years, really because of these discoveries. A little bit about her. She was a composer, pianist, and organist and teacher, and she was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. Remember where William Grant Still grew up. And she's in a mixed race family. Her father was the only African American dentist in the city, and her mother was a music teacher. The family was respected in the area despite the racial issues of the time. Interestingly, much of her music was almost lost in a scheduled demolition of her former home. I'm reading from notes now. Apparently, some of it was, in fact, lost, but a good amount was rescued. Price had a successful career as a composer, but after her death, her work was forgotten as new styles emerged. And, in fact, she's kind of she's definitely not in a modernist style. She's really very much a romantic, American romanticism, and also composer with Black American influences. She's been rediscovered recently due to the new American interest in the work of Black American composers. Her music is very easy on the ear and sounds mostly European, with some blue notes suggesting her southern U.S. roots, at least in this case. I wrote that hearing this recording, but the quintet, her piano quintet, which we'll hear later, is a different story. I'll talk about that when we get to it. Okay, so we hear the Adoration. This is it's a winding vocalese type melody, very pretty. Fantasy number 1 starts with loud chords and dramatic melodic flourish on the violin, sort of like Beethoven's Fifth Piano Concerto. It kind of has these big chords that the violin sort of solos over. And then, except that in the piano concerto, it's the piano. Okay, and then the main section begins. It switches from a fast southern country dance melody and a blues-tinged slow section. The slower section reminded me of passages from the slow movement of Dvorak's New World Symphony or his American String Quartet. There's a lot of Dvorak influence in Price's music, or rather, there's a lot of Black American melodic influence in both of their music. It's really hard to say but Dvorak was we'll get to him in a moment, but he was really the person who encouraged American composers to use music that emerged from the American soil, like Black American music or Native American music in their symphonies, because that would make it a true American music, he believed. Okay. Anyway, Fantasy number 2, the other piece, starts with a piano solo, and then the main melody comes in on the violin. This work is mostly slow and musing. These are intimate works of Florence Price. They're well worth hearing. And we go to Samuel Coleridge Taylor, the very famous British composer. He's got an interesting story as well. His father, okay, he's mixed race. His father was descended from, now he's British, remember. His father was descended from African American slaves, okay, so in America, who were freed by the British and evacuated from the colonies during the Revolutionary War. So the British kind of freed some of the slaves, I guess, that were around them in New York and places like that, and took them back to England and set them and freed them. And so Coleridge Taylor's family, after the war, sort of grew up in England. Coleridge Taylor was widely celebrated during his lifetime, and he was especially admired by Black Americans, as we've seen with, Coleridge Taylor, Perkinson's mother, naming her son after him. He died young of pneumonia at the age of 37. He's not too unusual. I think about Chopin, Schubert, people like that. And he collected and orchestrated what he termed Negro melodies in his Opus 59 work. There are 24 of them in that. And this is going to be like a rich treasure trove of music that Goosby, and also later, we're going to talk about Isata Kanneh-Mason, they're both going to mine some of these works. Goosby selected an arrangement by the turn-of-the-century American violinist Maud Powell of Deep River for this recording. We're also going to hear it in its original piano transcription later. He has a really good feel for this. The bluesiness of the melody comes out really well. The arrangement is impressive and showy in the middle section. And the melody is so catchy that I'd imagine it brought the house down when it was played in this arrangement. It's really nice. So that's all we have from Coleridge Taylor on this recording. Last, we have Dvorak's Sonatina in G major for violin and piano, Opus 100, written in 1893, the same year as the New World Symphony and the American String Quartet, both well worth hearing. Now, everybody knows the New World Symphony, I think, but probably not everyone has heard the American String Quartet, and please make sure you hear that, Opus 96, I believe it is. It's so catchy, it's so good. String Quartet number 12 in F major. One of the best string quartet, one of the catchiest string quartets you'll ever hear. All four movements are absolutely fantastic. Anyway, we're hearing the Sonatina for violin and piano here, which is similar. And I think it's fitting that this work concludes the album, because Dvorak said back then, in 1893, that the future music of America must be founded on what he called Negro melodies, because they were a product of the soil and were therefore American. Okay, the Sonatina reminds us of these Dvorak melodies, and also what we've just heard in Florence Price. Puts us into the world of the New World Symphony. Musical gestures all have that similar lilting blue melodies that we hear in the string quartet in particular, with some figuration in between. Okay, he seemed to have a handful of these melodies in his ear, these kind of Black American melodies, from working at the conservatory, and he used them freely in a lot of the works that he wrote in this era. The slow second movement is highly reminiscent of the American Quartet's slow movement, and the flavor of Black folk song melodies interspersed with clever accompaniment and beautiful figuration. The third movement, scherzo, is cheerful and lively, and the final movement has a rollicking, carefree quality. And we're finished with this album. I found this deeply satisfying all around. Fantastic playing by Goosby. It's an excellent showcase for him. And he's really at home in this music. He plays it exceptionally well. He's got a beautiful tone, excellent sense of pacing. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from him. I want to see what he does with the classical repertoire as well. Highly recommended.
Yeah, this is one that's an easy listen because of the strong melodic element in all these works. As you say,
yeah,
that's the common thread that runs through them. These melodies that are really influenced, by American music and Black musical experience. And so they're sort of, even if you haven't heard them before, there's some familiar element with them. And that sort of really allows Goosby's phrasing, which is one of his strong points, and his really nice tone to shine through them. And so it's a showcase for, his sort of strengths as a performer, and then, this sort of kind of selection of American music or American inspired music in the case of Dvorak. So that's the sort of sets a theme that runs through there and sort of gives you a thread to hold on to in there, in these strong melodies. And so it's a really enjoyable album, and nice interpretations, good playing, and nice sonics on this recording too. And yeah, I think pretty much, I can't imagine anyone not liking spending an hour listening to this one.
Right. I thought it was really bold also of him to just start with a new piece, and then go to the more familiar as the album went on. I think that was
Yeah, that's true. But I think with, as it gets a little bit more, well, it's not really traditional in the sense, but the first piece, especially with, the nice bass work on that, is this very contemporary feel to set the mood before it gets a little bit more traditional in there. And so you can maybe hook different type of listener into the being committed to getting through the whole experience there. But overall, I can't argue with the ordering or sequence of the works in that sense. And it'll hold you right through to the end and be very satisfying.
Okay, our second classical recording of today is a set of American quintets by the Kaleidoscope Chamber Collective, and this is on the Chandos label, the British label. And all of these works on this are all from the first half of the 20th century. We have two women composers on this, Amy Beach, and again, Florence Price. We just talked about her on Randall Goosby's album. Okay, both of whose works for violin and piano we've just talked about, right? So we're going to hear two kind of bigger works by them. They're piano quintets, multi-movement piano quintets, and they're on either end of a piece by Samuel Barber, his work Dover Beach, for string quartet, and it says here medium voice. It's usually performed by a baritone, but in this case, it's a bass voice that we hear. It's sung by Matthew Rose. He's a bass. I wonder if he's related to Gil Rose, friend of the podcast, Gil Rose. I wonder. It's a pretty common name, though, so it's hard to say. Anyway, he's the bass player here. Okay, so the program has these two bigger works by women composers and the one movement work by the male Barber with a male vocalist in it. It kind of makes like a nice. This program makes a kind of a nice man sandwich, I guess you can say. It's a man sandwich.
Every man likes a good sandwich.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, make me one.
Oh, no. All right. Anyway. Okay. So we never grew up. That's what happens when you listen to music your whole life. Anyway. All right. Who are we calling adults here? Who are we fooling? Anyway.
It's our listeners, not us.
It's our listeners who are adults, not us. There you go. All right. Okay. Okay. Oh, by the way, I should mention Barber's work is Dover Beach. It's a setting of the poem Dover Beach by the English poet Matthew Arnold. Okay. The program begins with Amy Beach's piano quintet. Okay. It's the earliest work here. It was written in 1907 and has had quite a few outings on record. In fact, the most recent one before this is paired with Elgar's piano quintet, and it's up for a Gramophone Award in the chamber music category this year. That's on Hyperion Records, and it features Garrick Olson on piano and the Tokach Quartet in the string quartet part. Okay, so this is an even newer recording. I can't really compare the two because I actually haven't heard that one. I'm going to have to give that a listen before we talk about those works.
This is really Brahms-esque.
Brahmsian, yeah. Okay, that's right away. That jumps out. It's a bit histrionic too, although not so much in this performance. So I'm kind of curious to hear what the Tokach quartet did with it. I'm going to have to go to that soon. This is in three movements. The first movement rises to a high passion, reminding me of early Brahms chamber works. Also, a Franck's piano quintet, César Franck. If you know that work, it's very histrionic. It really hits some shrieking sort of crescendo, climaxes there. There's some lovely haunting passages between the emotional peaks And this movement, or at least this piece, sounds like it takes some effort to perform. It requires some virtuosity, I think, especially from the pianist. The Kaleidoscope Collective beautifully puts the work across. The second movement begins quietly in a dusky 19th century American song sort of way. Also builds to a passionate climax about 2/3 of the way through. And the third movement starts at a compound meter, which I'm guessing is 6/8. I haven't seen the score. With a sort of fragmented winding melody. This composer likes highly passionate climaxes. I could say something about this, but because of your joke, I'm not going to. There you go. I don't want everybody after us. The passionate climax is played in octaves by the strings here, and we get more in this movement. Okay, there's a good amount of varying material and lovely ideas throughout the work. It's very enjoyable. You can hear why it's been recorded fairly often. I even remember hearing recordings of this on the old British ASV label back in the 1980s when I was first really starting to seriously listening to classical music. It's an enjoyable work, and because I've been hearing it all my life, I every once in a while I get more out of it each time I hear it. It's very appealing. It's not a terribly light listen, but it's not hard. It's familiar. Okay, it's kind of weighty, and it's good. Yeah. So, am I going to make the joke about multiple climaxes? Because there seem to be a lot of them in that work. I kind of wonder.
I think multiple climaxes are enjoyable, especially if you have a delicate second movement like this piece does, which was my, the most intriguing one to me. So
yeah. She had an interesting. It makes me think about her whole. She had a husband who, of course, didn't really want her performing in public, but he eventually died, and she wound up going to England and trying to promote her music. So I don't know. Maybe it has all those climaxes have something to do with that. Anyway. Barber's Dover Beach clocks in at less than 8 minutes, so you don't get much man in this in this recording. Okay, it's only a single movement. This is a pretty subtle performance, and it sounds different than other performances of this work I've heard. It's fairly well recorded. He wrote this, I think, when he was a student at Curtis Institute in the 30s, I seem to recall. This performance has a lighter touch. Usually the poem is pretty dramatic, and I think that the ensembles that play it usually try to get a sort of real pathos or emotion out of it. They play it with a kind of heavy, they kind of go pretty heavy on it. But this ensemble sort of breezes through it. They have a nice light touch, and I think the work benefits from that. It doesn't quite register as dramatic as the poem is, but I think we hear the whole form of the piece really well. And I liked Rose's voice. It had good presence, and it was a heavy bass. We usually hear a baritone in this, but the bass anchors the text really well, while the lighter kind of accompaniment. The tempo is fleeter than other performances, and I think that helps too. This is kind of an interesting interpretation of this work, and I would encourage you to hear it. It's a little different than what we're used to if you've heard this work before. They underplay the heaviness of the poem's theme, which is about sort of I guess, the pointlessness of life, I guess. You can sort of sum it up like that. Maybe you don't want to hear that this time in history.
This is my least favorite of the selections on this one, so I'll leave it at that. Yeah,
it's over pretty quickly. Anyway, I like it though; it's a good work. All right. Last, we have another Florence Price work, and this is a bigger one this time. This is her 4-movement piano quintet. This clocks in at about half an hour. She wrote 2 of these, 2 piano quintets, and the better known one is the other one, the one that's not recorded here. This particular one was probably earlier of the 2, and it was also, this is a premiere recording. It was found in that house that was scheduled for demolition, so it's just been unearthed and here performed from the manuscript, apparently, or the manuscript was recently made into a readable score for the musicians. It's late Romantic in style, but it celebrates Price's African-American heritage with echoes of hymns and spirituals in the second movement, and elements of the Juba stomping dance that originated on slave plantations in the Deep South, and you hear that in the third movement. The first movement also has a bit of breeziness, bluesiness to it as well, sort of in that Dvorak vein that we were talking about earlier. I shouldn't really say that because Dvorak kind of got it from black music. So ultimately, the source is those melodies that Dvorak and Price are borrowing from. The brief fourth movement has a rolling pace and ends with a lot of momentum. It's really good. Overall, the work is spacious and warm, considerably calmer than Amy Beach's. And in fact, I like this one better than the Amy Beach, but it's probably because it's the first time I'm hearing it, and it's just kind of new and fresh. It's got a lot of memorable material, well worth hearing. Anyway, this is another winner of this album. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I like this. I thought it's an interesting mix of this kind of late romantic style, but also the themes of the melodies are very American and identifiable. So it's those kind of combination of romanticism and American themes make it very endearing.
Especially to our ears, right?
Yeah, even though I hadn't heard it before, I was drawn into it because of the that kind of mix of things. So it really pulls you in, and it sounds familiar, even though for me I hadn't heard it before.
Okay, on we go to the last classical recording. Another, this is by the English pianist Isata Kanneh-Mason, and it's called Summertime, after the Gershwin song from Porgy and Bess. I wanted to get this one in. We were originally gonna do this one in August, this album, because of the title. But I'm glad I managed to get it in before summer ends. So we did get it in the summertime. This album really doesn't have a summer theme. It's just the name. Okay, so Isata Kanneh-Mason is a pianist. Oh, by the way, this album is on the Decca label. Okay, also on the Decca label. She's from a musical family, and I think of them as sort of like the Chung family of South Korea, like Kyunghwa and Myunwon, who are very older now, but very famous in the classical music world. Also, the Kwijkin family from Belgium, although they're a multi-generational musical family. The musicians in this family are all the same generation. She has a lot of brothers and sisters, and some of them are famous. Her brother Sheku Kanneh-Mason is a cellist, and he's probably the most famous person, the most famous of them all. But I think you're going to be hearing from a lot of them as the years roll on. They're all very young at the moment. All right, so her parents are Stuart Mason, who is a luxury hotel business manager from London, and Kadiatu Kanneh from Sierra Leone, a former lecturer at the University of Birmingham. Now, I read in a note somewhere that her father was from Sierra Leone, but I don't think that's right. It seems that her mother is from Sierra Leone, so she's... Anyway, that's the way it goes. Because notes get all confused on the internet. I don't know what's true or anything. All right, so anyway, Isata Kanneh-Mason, this is her second album that I know of. She released an album of works by Clara Schumann last year, so she likes to do music by women composers. All right, so I think we're going to be hearing a lot more of those. And there is a lot of music by women composers out there, and not all of it's recent. There's a lot from the 19th century that just doesn't get an outing. So she did that last year. This album is released on Decca, and it's an eclectic program of classical, jazz, and blues-influenced works by American composers, with the odd Englishmen like Samuel Taylor Coleridge sneaking in at the end. First, we hear two Gershwin arrangements. He's always around, isn't he? Made by the 20th century virtuoso pianist Earl Wild. I've never been a fan of these arrangements, but she makes a good case for them, I think. This is Summertime and I Got Rhythm, okay? There's some impressive virtuosity here. That's really what Earl Wild was all about. The I Got Rhythm, I feel like, is way too busy. But she brings out the rhythm really well, and all the technique is there. It's pretty impressive playing. If not an impressive taste. Good old Earl Wild, let me tell you. That's not saying anything bad about Isata Kanneh-Mason's taste. I was referring to Earl Wild there. Kanneh-Mason, we hear her here. She has a really hard, clear, and even percussive sound. It's a sharp attack, and every note registers when she plays, which is a good thing. It's nice, but it's not terribly soothing, I'd say. She'd probably be really good in the Bartok piano concertos, which are very percussive works. I'd really like to hear her in those, or in his solo piano music in general. I think that would be a good avenue for her to explore. Okay, this sort of hard sound gets a bit wearing, to be honest. Next, we hear Samuel Barber. She's getting into some serious classical music here. There's Nocturne in homage of the Irish composer John Field. And he's famous because his nocturnes inspired Chopin, so that's why we know him, really. Then we have the big intellectual work on this album, Barber's Piano Sonata in E-flat minor, written for and premiered by Vladimir Horowitz, the greatest pianist of the 20th century, arguably. Some people would say not arguably. She's pretty careful on this work, and she articulates every note, making this dense work that relies more on musical gestures and melody comprehensible. This is not a work I've really ever liked, and I kind of got it a little bit more. Maybe it's just because I have more experience and I'm older now, too. But this performance kind of clarified a lot of the sort of levels of the harmonic things and the melodic material, the level that are going on. Actually, there really isn't any melody in this work. It's mostly motifs, and it's a semitone motif that's building up the melody in the way Beethoven is. That's sort of hard on the ear.
She plays this really well, yeah.
She does, yeah.
But it's, I mean, and that's a task because it's a really busy work that it puts a burden on the listener to get through this. But I think she charts the map through it pretty well as I've heard, and makes it kind of accessible. But it's a tough one to follow through. Yeah,
and because you think of Samuel Barber too, and you don't really think of him as being, because you think of the Adagio for strings or things like that, and this is really in a whole different type of work. I've heard this played by Marc-Andre Hamelin, and that was not an easy listen. This one wasn't either, but again, I think her Heart Attack serves her well here. Okay, she kind of clarifies a lot of the material for me. Mm-hmm. All right. She's especially impressive in the contrapuntal percussive fourth movement I wrote there. After that, we get a little relief. More Gershwin follows. This time, a piano transcription of The Man I Love, arranged for concert performance by Percy Grainger, the English/Australian composer. And then we get the 3 jazzy piano preludes, which I've always really liked. She gets the jazzy feel here very well. Again, that hard sound, and everything is articulated really clearly. Nice dynamics, good she distinguishes the levels between the accompaniment and the melody really, really well, because these are very percussive works, actually, especially the first and third movement. The second movement is a lot quieter, and she gets a softer attack on this. I think she might be using the una corda pedal here, and it's still a bright sound though in that second movement. I actually played that second movement. Most young pianists do. Young American pianists get this put in front of them. It's really nice. Okay, next comes Amy Beach again. We heard her piano quintet in the previous recording. This is really a piece of salon music by the Still Waters. It's a quiet, sort of tranquil piece. We hear the una corda pedal here, certainly. She's using it for the quiet opening. This is a piece that really should be not only played more often, but given to piano students. It's got an arpeggiated accompaniment with a nice melody on top. It really sounds like it would be an ideal student piece. Okay? It has a Moonlight Sonata quality, the Beethoven first movement of the Moonlight Sonata, of arpeggiated bass with melody. Next comes Copland's piece, The Cat and the Mouse. This isn't often heard, but it is taught to piano students. I've seen it played live, and this is a piece I think that benefits from seeing it played, because it's got like a mouse escaping from a pouncing cat kind of quality to it with the hands. Okay, like the hands are kind of like jumping on each other, sort of. So if you can see someone play this, it's kind of cute. Listening to it, it's okay. I don't really like this piece very much, to be honest. It's fun. It's a little sort of discordant to listen to, but it's more fun to see than to hear, I think. And then we end this whole program with Samuel Taylor Coleridge again. Okay, first we hear his impromptu number 2 in B minor. This is apparently the first recording of this work. It starts with a kind of appoggiatura figure. Appoggiatura is kind of when you're like one note above the chord and then kind of collapse down onto it. And this sort of figure sort of is what the piece is built on. It's kind of a clever idea. It's a nice piece, really well worth hearing. And the remaining pieces are all from the 24 Negro Melodies. Again, that's the title of the collection. Okay, Deep River is heard again, and here in piano solo version. The next piece is called the Bamboola. A Bamboola is a type of drum made with a rum barrel with a skin stretched over it. It's also the name of the dance done to it. These days, unfortunately, it has become a racial epithet in French, so you might want to be careful about where you're saying this, okay, this title. There's also a very famous piece by Gottschalk, Louis Moreau Gottschalk, the New Orleans composer from the 19th century, called the Bamboola for piano solo. This uses the same rhythm. The Coleridge Taylor piece uses the same rhythm. So it's kind of a fun piece. It kind of, in that kind of, it's not quite like ragtime, but it's got that sort of dancey kind of rhythm to it. Let me see. And last, we have Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. Really beautiful, spiritual. Coleridge Taylor wanted to showcase these melodies in the same way, in his words, that Brahms showcased the Hungarian melodies he heard in his youth, Dvorak did for Bohemian music, and Grieg for Norwegian music. So he wanted to do the same for Black American music. Deep River, of course, is a beautiful melody. Here it's just simply laid out over arpeggiated chords that resemble guitar strumming, and then it's presented again in several variations. Bamboola does the same. It starts out with the rhythm and a few variations. And Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. The melody here is integrated into the accompaniment with chords, and the melody's first appearance embedded in the chords is really beautiful. It's a pretty gorgeous arrangement. Sounds like it'd be a little tricky to pull the melody out of those chords, though. Anyway, another enjoyable album. You need to really warm to this pianist's, the sound of this pianist's attack. It's really very hard. It's like the opposite of somebody like, say, Murray Pariah, who has this kind of almost pearly sort of attack. I mean, it's to each his own, really, but it serves her well here. I think she chose this program really well, and I enjoyed this recording too. What do you think?
Yeah, I like this one. All the various pieces. Of the Barbers, I like the Nocturne. I thought her touch worked well on that. The Barber Piano Sonata, as you said, it's kind of busy.
Yeah. It's highly intellectual, well. Yeah.
And I like the Gershwin interpretation with the dynamics and the beach. It's kind of placid feeling. I like the Copland, as you said, it's sort of a performance piece, but the playful nature and the Coleridge Taylor pieces are gentle and nice. She has that unique attack style, but I appreciate this sort of integration of, sort of Americanism, American influences into sort of codifying an American identity in classical music. Yeah. I think that's, especially, America dominating 20th century music in all sort of popular music styles. And, in classical music as well, even though many people may not be aware of it, but, from the various folk musics, African-American influences, and then, the great sort of composers, even like, Stephen Foster and these people who wrote these great tunes that people know or have heard, but where they get placed, in sort of a bigger picture of, musical history and then how they're developed. I think that's important. And so, it's good to see all of that music sort of recognized and then developed. And especially, since European composers from early on had, taken sort of pride in incorporating that folk music into contemporary classical works of the time. And it's good to see, recognition for the same ideas being done in American music and, sort of given respect in classical music too. And so I think it's important to get those traditions recognized from all elements in the folk music, African-American music. And then here today we see the blues traditions recognized as, legitimate forms and then developed and interpreted well. And so overall, I think it's a satisfying program and a good focus for these kind of recordings with a common thread.
Yeah, I want to say that the whole idea of putting folk melodies into classical music was a big thing in the late 19th, early 20th century. This is really the period of all those revolutions when countries became sort of, I guess governed by the people. You can say it's really when the whole aristocratic class was finally, the whole idea of like kings and stuff were just being gotten rid of. And the idea that the people and the music arose from the people who belonged to the land, came from. It's nationalism in its earliest guise. These days, nationalism has kind of like a negative connotation to it. It's really changed. The idea has changed a lot.
Not musical at all.
But at this time, people were trying to, it's not musical at all, right? But people were trying to kind of identify their country with the art and the music that was being made by the people who were there. An idea that's gone out of style now, but
yes,
we have a lot of great music and music that identifies certain countries. I think of like Finland with Sibelius, Nielsen. Vaughan Williams did it for England. There's so many, really.
Yeah.
Okay, of these national composers, sort of.
So. I guess it's hard with America because
Bartok as well. Don't forget.
Yeah, Bartok. Yeah. I guess it's hard with American music because everyone knows American pop music and, blues as, sort of the pop influence of it. So it sort of takes one remove.
Copeland tried to do it. He was the one who really went that way.
Yeah. But I think it takes, it takes sort of you need to escape historically from it a little bit. Maybe now that we're in the 21st century,
right,
we can revisit and, especially maybe the millennial generation is not familiar with the music in its original form, and then to see it in sort of a new presentation can give it that sort of new experience in a different format. To me, I mean, it's nothing new, but I like to see it recognized and then given some legitimacy and then developed on in this different setting. So yeah, it's satisfying.
Yeah. All right. So we're almost all American there. There we go.
Almost all American. Well,
now we've got an all American form of music.
Yeah. In the jazz category. This, I have to say, because we had a backlog of things that I wanted to listen to, and then they just happened to all become available. So there's no real strategy here. I just picked some different things that had become available that I was waiting to listen to, and they happened to be all American. Again, in one form or another, we've sort of explored a lot of European jazz, Scandinavian things, Italian music, French jazz, but this week is all American. And it just happened to be some things that I was listening to, and I picked a variety of instruments and things that had come out that I wanted to hear, just because it would be either new to me or something that matched what we've focused on before. And so first up is an album called Obstacles by Pete Rodriguez on the Sunnyside Records label. And I wanted to hear this because it's trumpet. And as a trumpet player, I'm always interested to check out some new recordings by names. And I wasn't familiar with Rodriguez's works, but reading his bio was kind of interesting. And I thought I wanted to hear this album, but it took a while for it to get out available on streaming. And then here it was. And so this recording features Pete Rodriguez on trumpet, John Ellis, tenor and soprano saxophone, Luis Perdomo, piano and keyboards, another Rodriguez, Ricardo Rodriguez on bass, and on drums, Rudy Royston, who we've heard several times before on Adult Music. Going back to episode 14, we heard him with the Russian trumpeter, Alex Sipiagin, and then more recently, episode 23 with Art Hidehara's new release. And so, yeah, he's a really exciting drum player who gets things like the little fills that get in those slots done really well. And so Rodriguez is kind of a up-and-coming name on trumpet, and he's got an interesting background. He was raised in both the Bronx and Puerto Rico. Well, he's now based in Austin, Texas, and his father is kind of famous salsero performer Pete El Conde Rodriguez. And so Pete Rodriguez on trumpet came up through Latin music, but he's firmly establishing himself in the jazz world with not much of a Latin influence on the music. And this recording is kind of maybe a cathartic kind of thing. There's some interesting tunes.
For him?
Yeah, for him.
Cathartic for him, yeah.
It's some interesting compositions on here and the purposes behind them. Anyway, it starts out with a tune called 50, which is a tune to commemorate his own 50th birthday. And this is actually a contrafact, which is a tune based on another tune. And so this one is built over John Coltrane's Moment's Notice. So it's built over those chord changes in the structure. And the tune starts out with sax that's then joined by trumpet on the angular melody, which is kind of seems to be very modern styled melodies on a lot of the tunes that Rodriguez pens here. Ellis solos first, and he got some nice structured melodies over the changes here. And you'll get a real good sort of feel for Royston's drumming here, the way he puts his hits and fills between the gaps in what's going on in any ensemble he's in. He's a really great section player on drums. And then when Rodriguez comes in on his solo, the rhythm kind of changes up, and he really explores the harmonies in the backing of this tune, but he does it really in a fluid style, so you get a sense of his sort of trumpet style here. Also, this one has a nice piano solo by Perdomo, and some nice rhythmic work in his solo here too. The second track is called Abraham, and this is a work based on the works of inspirational speaker Esther Hicks. I guess was a,
Abraham. Yeah, I know this.
Yeah, Abraham. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah, she channels these beings. Really, he names after her.
And
I didn't realize that when I was listening. Now I want to hear it again.
Kind of lush trumpet intro here before the bass and drums set a slow groove on this kind of pensive modal tune. Everyone plays a bit on here, and then there's a break, and Perdomo comes in with a new mood on Rhodes piano, which is kind of cool, and a little intro there and a solo, and Ellis also solos, and but Rodriguez lays backs on this one with just some lyrical backing tunes lines in here. Number 3 on this album is El Proceso. We got a kind of rhythm section intro to the tune that has a lot of interesting different sections and meters. Rodriguez takes the first solo on trumpet here. He plays a lot of fast lines over the syncopated piano and bass backing. And then Royston really fills the gaps with really tight and tasty drum work here. Ellis switches up to soprano sax on this tune, and we get some more Fender Rhodes piano here, which is cool.
I just want to say the Fender Rhodes throughout this album really was drawing my ear. I really like this guy's playing a lot. The sound itself doesn't often do anything for me, but the way he shaped it really pulled me in. I really liked the sound and his playing both in this case. Yeah,
it's very tasty. Yeah. And then the tune kind of goes out with a vamp on Rhodes there too, and then Royston gets some time to drum away over the vamp. 4 is an interesting tune called Academic Backstabbing. Apparently, Rodriguez had kind of a brief academic career, which featured some unsatisfying experiences, and this tune comes out of that. And it's
don't we know about this?
Yeah, we know a bit about that. This sort of nasty dweebs you can encounter in this world of academia. So this is a former mentor turned backstabber. It's a very short piece, only 2 minutes and 18 seconds. And it's got a piano intro with some unison horn parts, and then these piano clusters that are inserted into the short piece. It
sounds very academic, actually, the piano.
I think that's the idea. He's using this composition to sort of work out some things, which is cool.
By the way, how did you find out about these what these are about?
I found a description of the works on an album description page. Yeah, otherwise I would have been in the dark about it.
So it was online.
Okay. Yeah, online. I researched a bit on the record label and some other things.
Oh, cool.
5 is called Mi Ritmo, My Rhythm. It's a really monk-like composition here. And Ellis takes a tenor solo first, and then Rodriguez has a nice kind of measured trumpet solo that builds his phrases. But what I like about the soloing on here is he has a lot of pauses. It's a mature style. You get a lot of time to digest the melodic ideas that he has, and he has time to think and build upon them and progress the solo. He's not rushed at all through his ideas. And then Perdomo also has a nicely spaced solo that stretches out the rhythms in his phrases. And then a short kind of bass solo by Ricardo Rodriguez, but he walks through it kind of, he walks out of what's happening before and then into the solo. Then the ending rhythm phrases change up into kind of a piano vamp. And again, Royston gets some space to fill with some drum tasty things until the horns come back in. The next track is Triple Positive. And this is a really nice slow groove that starts out with, again, chords on the Rhodes and some bass fills. And Rodriguez plays the rich flowing melody on trumpet, and then Ellis adds some nice harmony just in spots. It's kind of a cool arrangement. It's really lyrical. The trumpet solo's first, and he's got a nice contrast between fast lines and then fluid things going on too. And Ellis keeps that kind of fluid style in his tenor solo. Perdomo comes in and mixes the lines with kind of rhythmic accented chords in his piano solo. And then he returns to the melody flow to the end. Number 7 is a short piece again called Austin and Ally. I don't know if this is a place reference, Austin, Texas, where he's based or not. It's only about 2 minutes long.
Is he based there?
Yeah, now he is. Yeah. So this is really a composed piece. There's not a lot of improvising going on here, but it's got kind of alternating horn lines and complex rhythm sections. And then sort of the mood changes up to a really kind of happy vamp. And then it goes back to the last section, to the ending. So it's a really short kind of statement piece. I guess he just had an idea for the composition that came through. Number 8 is the title track, Obstacles, which is based on Guy Grace's Minority, a tune that people probably would recognize from a Clifford Brown recording. So the syncopation and pauses in the melody, it gives a real sense of motion through some type of obstacle course, sort of waiting to work around kind of things. And so it's kind of a fun composition. And Rodriguez makes a nice trumpet solo here that gets a lot of tension with repeated figures. And although it's sort of, a homage to Clifford Brown, the end of his solo is a really Freddie Hubbard-esque kind of styling here that you can't help but identify, which is really cool. And then Ellis has this solo on sax coming here on a syncopated section. And then in here, then the piano drops out and gives him a little bit more freedom. And then the piano also has a nice solo after the sax that comes into some more vamping for Royston to get a workout on. Number 9 on here after that is called Someone Else. And this is another nice Rhodes piece. The sound sets the texture for the ballad. Get a nice laid back horn melody. It gives way to a really woody bass solo that comes up first. And Ellis is back on soprano on this one for a nice lyrical solo. And also a good Rhodes piano solo here, which about 3/4 of the way through the tune, there's a break and the Rhodes sort of makes a restart and the rhythm comes back in. And then Rodriguez takes his solo and he really takes his time on this one. He gets to build some interesting ideas. And one of the things he does here, some really pretty things with just one repeated note. And he shows what you can do with, just a simple idea with one note and varying the rhythmic attacks on it. And this tune, which doesn't happen a lot on jazz tunes, but it sort of fades out while he's still soloing with some interesting ideas. You'd be tempted to turn up the volume and just see what he's doing.
Why did they do that?
I don't know why they do that. Yeah. Number 10.
He may have missed a note or something
it could be
coming up or something. You don't know.
This is another cathartic piece. It's called Mary Dick Ellen, which is described in the notes I read as a musical smudge on a former racist colleague. And so this is kind of a mysterious piece.
Is the word dick supposed to be like some kind of expletive or?
I have no idea. We can only guess.
Or is it a name?
As a less than 2 minutes of composition, it's really a rather angry sounding collection of ideas before the piano sort of comes in with a groove, and then you get some horn lines over that, and then it sort of suddenly ends. So I guess it's sort of a statement of sorts. And it ends with another kind of cathartic message called F you, John. I guess we can interpret those F.
It's like a punk album.
Yes. Yeah. And so here you get kind of a hectic rhythmic figured horn melody that's over in a kind of ominous piano and bass line. The piano solo is first, and then Rodriguez comes in on trumpet, and the piano drops out on this one, gives him a lot of harmonic space to work on some things here. And then Ellis also comes on tenor, and behind him the bass drops out, so it's just sax and drums for a while before everyone comes back in, and it's kind of an ominous tune. So overall, this is my first listen to Rodriguez, but he's got some bite and things to say. He's got a mature trumpet style, and he can give a variety of moods. There's some ballad playing here. He's got good trumpet chops, creativity. He's got all original tunes here with some different moods. And I'm sure he's got a Latin music background, but he sort of firmly plants his foot here in kind of, modern jazz idiom. And the players are tight. There's some good interplay between everyone. And he's a player that I want to look out for and see what he does next. Despite the kind of mysterious pieces to take out his angst that I'm not so sure on the genesis of. Well, why not? If it inspires you, do it. Sure.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, why not have like an entire jazz idiom that goes in this direction? It's just songs about people I hate or something like that.
Yeah, why not?
It's certainly been done in like, punk rock and things like Taylor Swift's entire career is about, what she hates about her ex-boyfriends and things like that,
I mean,
why not in jazz? It'd be cool. Let's make this like an adult thing.
Yeah. But
okay, so on this record, I like the trumpet playing a lot, and I just want to say that, like I said, the Fender Rhodes was really what pulled my mind. This guy's a really tasteful player, and there were a few, like when he gets sort of angsty, he gets into that, like an academic there are a few other works like this. Academic Backstabbing. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Academic Backstabbing 101, where he gets into that sort of that Cecil Taylor type, piano playing, using all 12 notes or things like that. That seems to be an indication of something that he doesn't really like very much.
Right.
Or whoever's playing that. Rodriguez plays the trumpet on this.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So who's the pianist again?
What's his Perdomo? Luis Perdomo. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering who came up with those. Yeah. Is that like his idea, or is that sort of laid out in front of him? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, so it was I thought it was overall a good album, but there are just a few pieces I was like, now that I know more about what they were about, I kind of appreciate them more. But I enjoyed this.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I always want to hear new trumpet players, and he seems to have his own thing going, and I'll be looking forward to seeing what other things he comes out with.
Yeah.
Then of course the next one, this one has been on my must listen to because it just said organ trio.
Yeah, I'm like that too, and I want to say you just play preaching to the choir here when you're putting up an organ trio record on this podcast anyway, because I'm a big fan of this.
We love
guitar and organ together are really great.
We love organ trio, guitar and organ, and this album is a real gem. And an incredible guitarist here and fine organist. And
I just want to say, by the way, Kyle Asche, right? It says the Kyle Asche Organ Trio, and again on the cover you got a guy with a guitar, and you see the word organ. It kind of bugs me somehow. Yeah,
it sort of bothers you. So Kyle Asche is
because people assume that a trio has a piano in it, but that's why they call it an organ trio. But he's a guitarist. Yeah.
So Kyle Asche is and this group is a Chicago-based group. I guess they're more of a local thing, but definitely they deserve much wider recognition. Here we've got 5 Down Blues on Cellar Live label, and apparently they recorded this last year in March, just going into the whole COVID thing, but they got it laid down in the studio. So we've got Kyle Asche on guitar, Pete Benson on organ and Hammond B3 organ, and George Fudas on drums. And so Kyle Asche, Chicago-based, he began his pro career in the early 2000s in Chicago, and he's appeared extensively throughout Chicago and beyond, even performing with Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Ensemble. And this is just, if you like organ jazz like we do, and we've featured a lot on this broadcast.
we certainly have.
This album is, you got to hear this one. It's a nice mix of original and other cover tunes. It starts out with an Asche original, 5 Down Blues. You're off to a really groovy start here. Some great unison lines with the guitar and organ that contrast with the walking bass on the organ pedals in the melody here. And you get a real good taste of Asche's fluid jazz chops right from the start here. It's a blues with kind of a twist in the composition. Really nice backing by Benson on organ here. He builds a real bluesy solo of his own. He's got some nice outside lines going way in the harmonies that build tension. And then they both trade off with the drums here extendedly before they come back around to the head. Second tune is Dorothy. This is by organist Melvin Rhine, who played with Wes Montgomery, who's obviously a big influence on Asche's style. This one has a Latin beat that also has a contrasting section. So you get these two different beats throughout the tune, and Asche really he gets some of these Montgomery style double stops right at the beginning of the tune, so you get that really cool sound and some great organ and guitar solos that work the tension and release of those contrasting sections here, and then a kind of a Latin percussion breakdown after the solos. Track 3 is Pretty Eyes, a Horace Silver composition. And this is like a minor 6/8 Horace Silver tune that has a little bit of a major turn in the melody that gives it a kind of appeal and contrast with the beginning and end of the melody. The guitar and organ work together on the melody, and then Asche really busts into his solo with some heart attacks on this one. And then Benson changes up the stops on the organ with some tonal variety that builds to a climax here. This is a really cool tune. 4, Delirium by the sax player Harold Land. It's a fast swing. Listen to the bass pedals on this one. I mean, his feet are really, really pounding out the bass lines here on the organ bass. And Asche comes in with a super fluid solo, lots of creative melodic figures that sort of finishes up with these amazing double stops. And then Benson swings along too. And flutist gets a long drum solo on this one. Cool tune. We got another Melvin Rhine tune, number 5, Light, Life, Love. It's a slow ballad. Starts out with some seductive bends by Asche on the guitar, some really thick bass pedals and swelling chords from the organ to create the mood. You get this one, you better have your whiskey nearby. That's what I wrote, Where's Your Whiskey? I was listening to this in the afternoon, but I felt like I wanted darkness in my Knob Creek bottle one here. Yeah, Benson's solo beginning notes have that great organ articulation. It's just sort of that kind of stuttering organ things, and he swells it in just the right places. He gets some Leslie here too. He changes up the stops. This, to me, this is the organ showcase of the album. It's a fabulous solo. This tune, track 5, this is the pinnacle for me of the organ on this album. But then Asche comes in again on his fluid playing, and the finish is kind of bendy, like the beginning too. Yeah, this track, oh man, yeah, this is like real. If you like organ trio, you can just die and go to heaven on this track, right?
You'll be okay. Yeah, this was kind of a. It was kind of an odd opening too. This is the one with the guitar, the kind of bendy guitar, the bendy
right? Thing, yeah. This guy's a great guitarist. They got 3 more tracks here. Kind of jazz standard by Livingston Evans, number 6, Never Let Me Go. But the arrangement is really cool. Normally this is done as sort of a ballad treatment, but this one has this really cool intro vamp. You won't know that this tune is going to come up, and then the melody is kind of placed over that with sort of interesting rhythmic ideas. So it's a very creative arrangement of this tune, and really nice rhythmic ideas in the organ solo too. And Asche's solo has these really amazing liquid lines that flow through, and then it goes to a funky ending here too. So nice treatment of this standard here, very creative. 7, this is a great title, Dirty Fingers by John Patton.
Great title for an organist, especially.
Oh, yeah. So you get a kind of interesting descending riff and a really alluring melody on this tune. Really nice interplay between the guitar and organ on the melody. And Asche has some great riffs and bluesy nuggets in his solo here too. And then Benson really gets his fingers dirty with some really funky finger figures on this one. So just perfect tune for organ trio. And the set closes out with another Asche original called Dig Deep. It's a nice swinging, slow groove, a nice backbeat on this tune, and melody. This is an original composition, but you'll swear you've heard it before. It's got that familiar quality and more great solos all around. So if you like organ trio, it's a fabulous recording. I mean, these guys are Chicago-based. I don't think they're well known outside of that, but they should be. Asche's guitar playing is just top notch, really fluid. Benson's organ treatment is great, and the way they play together and the choice of material is really good. This is really second to none from organ releases. We've done a lot of organ stuff here, but these guys are really good, and if you like organ, you got to hear this album.
Yeah, I liked this a lot too, right from the beginning. It had this great swinging quality to it, that great organ sound, and the guitar playing was fantastic too. Yeah. This is really what's that really made it for me. Like, he's getting everything here. Yeah, I like this all the way through. Really, just one joy after another. By the way, when we do our end of year, we'll also do an end of year, like our favorite recordings of the year that we talked about on the podcast. I mean, is the jazz going to be like, the top 5 are all going to be organ trios, and then the other 5
might just be. Might just
I think I got at least 2 organ trios on there for that.
Yeah. So I'm really, I saw this one and I didn't know Kyle Asche, and I was waiting. When I saw it on a new release list, it was like not available. I was like, when is it going to be available? So again, I'd kind of forgotten about it. And then I saw, well, it's suddenly available. And then when I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, this was worth the wait. So this guy definitely, as a guitarist, should be more well known. But I'm glad that he's focusing on the organ trio format, because there's. When it's done right, that mix of just guitar and organ, it's just perfect. And
great record. I hope this is on CD. I got to check this out probably.
I'll definitely buy this one. I'll definitely get this one for my collection. And finally, so this one I saw
Rising Star. Someone who the record companies like.
And I usually like to stay away from these kind of things because I like to give our attention to things that other people might not notice, like the previous album. And so this one is.
See, my thought though is that I think most people aren't going to know much about what's going on in jazz in general.
Yeah, probably. So we've got the Rising Star and Prodigy pianist Matthew Whitaker. And his new album just out on Resilience Music called Connections. And so maybe you know Matthew Whitaker. If not, he's Prodigy, 20-year-old pianist, blind pianist.
It's really funny because I was listening to this record and I was like, this guy, there's kind of a Stevie Wonder quality to him. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that he's blind too. I mean, this is a little too much. It's too much of a coincidence.
As a matter of fact, in one of his, things is that he actually opened for Stevie Wonder at age 10, which boosted his fame. There was a big
influence there.
Yes, and that he was also featured on 60 Minutes, his story. So he's got a lot of
being built up by the establishment, shall we say?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and fair enough. This kid has huge talent, but also. I think
definitely his prodigious skills are on display on this record.
Yeah, but I also think that recognition and then the resulting promotion and production is actually the weak point of this recording, which I'll get to. Not to slight his performance in playing anyway, because the kid is
pretty fantastic.
Yeah, he's pretty fantastic. So this album is produced by bassist Derek Hodge, and this also features. John Baptiste on piano on one tune with also guest Regina Carter on violin. The rest of the tracks feature numerous drummers, Vester Garnett, Jonathan Blake, Otis Brown III, and Isaiah Johnson, bass, Indea Owens, Kareem Hutton, percussion, Nega Santos, guitar, Marcos Robinson, horns, Steve Okendo, and flute, Gabriel Garo. And so it's a huge, almost too long recording of 16 tracks.
Yeah, it went on for quite a while.
It goes on a bit too much, I think. Anyway, I'll get to sort of overall analysis of that at the end. I'll go through them briefly. Track 1 is called Journey Uptown. This is one of Whitaker's original compositions. Starts out with a kind of piano intro vamp and then percussion. It sounds almost like marimba in here that comes in flute. It's kind of a modal tune with a lot of rhythm change-ups that settles into a funky groove. It sort of takes you through some different paces of a journey, maybe going through the city uptown. So maybe that's the inspiration for the title. Number 2 is A New Day, another original tune. This is an upbeat swinging organ tune. So that's one of Whitaker's points is that he's showcased here on acoustic piano, organ, and also some synthesizer tunes. So he's kind of covering all the bases here of the keyboard world. This one, organ, and I like this one. It's a nice shared melody with Robinson's guitar, and then the rhythm shifts from swing to straighter rock kind of in sections. So it's one of those tunes that has these contrasting sections. And then Whitaker shows off his organ chops here, and he gets a really big sound to climax his solo. Number 3 is by Thelonious Monk tune, and this is acoustic piano duet with Jean-Baptiste, and they have fun with this. They mix up the rhythm changes, the rhythms, and over the changes, and they play some. They have fun with dissonances and sort of long chromatic lines, and they're cheering each other on, and either vocalizations and things are recorded here too. They're just kind of having fun with it, and so it's kind of a playful rendering of this Monk tune.
Yeah, he's changing instruments on every recording too. Like he plays on Journey Uptown, he plays the piano, and then on The New Day he's on the organ. And I forgot what Mbaya is John Baptiste on the piano.
Yeah,
but,
they're both on piano on this one, right?
They're both on piano on this one. But yeah, so he's really showing off what he can do on this record.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious that he wants to show his ability here.
Yeah. And track 4 is Spain, the Chick Corea tune. But he does a kind of a little Rodrigo intro here on organ.
You mean the composer Rodrigo?
Yeah, composer Rodrigo. Yeah,
Concerto de Aranjuez.
Yeah, so it's a concerto opening, and then he turns that into kind of a gospel-y thing before they get to the kind of head of the Korea tune, which also is done in a really synthy and then electric piano kind of sound. But interestingly, he takes the melody kind of into a halftime slow exposition for effect in some spots, which was kind of an interesting idea. And then he switches over on electric piano and solos on this over the kind of thumping Latin groove in the percussion and bass. Then he brings the organ back in again for a little bit of backing, and then at the end of the tune. I thought this one is a bit overproduced, and I could sense like kind of a compression in the recording of this tune. So the production of it sort of, kind of was drawing away from my enjoyment of.
It didn't come across as like a fully live performance. It sounded like it was multi-tracked, maybe.
Yeah,
like things were layered on
here in the production. Yeah. Number 5, Connections, another original tune. This is kind of a haunting. Minor chiming piano chords with kind of drum soloing behind. And then you get some kind of heavy bass piano lines that build tension under the chords, and then some higher cascading piano notes then he adds sort of a voice narrative at the end. This is one of the weaker tunes from my point. He's making some kind of statement here, but musically, I thought,
and it's the title track, huh?
It's the title track, yeah.
Weird.
Then 6, Stop Fighting. It's another original tune of his. It's a nice piano intro. It's joined by kind of subtle Latin percussion and there's kind of I think a bowed bass in here. It's kind of an upper register. I think it's bass because at first I thought maybe it's a cello sound, but no, I think it's a bowed bass and flute lines that are added on top here. Then there's some repeated piano chords that build up the tension. And then about a little bit halfway through, past the halfway, a heavy beat comes in under a kind of new synth lead section that brings it into kind of fusion territory. And then a piano riff from the beginning returns kind of for a soft ending. Number 7 is...
We also get a little vocal message in this tune too.
Yeah.
Where he talks to us.
Yeah.
Which kind of, the usual kind of, it was a bit of an anodyne message. Just stop fighting. Just stop, he says.
Stop,
Yeah, thanks. Oh, okay.
Well, he is 20 years old, so...
I know, yeah.
But
But I think of that Bill Burr routine. Oh, am I not supposed to do that? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just old and jaded. What can I say?
Jaded, we're jaded.
Yeah, we're jaded.
7, Stevie Wonder tune, Lately. It's a nice solo ballad piano treatment here. There's some horn and flute backing that comes in midway as he builds the tune up. He's got a lot of rolls, percussive playing, and some runs. I thought it's a bit overplayed here. It could be a little more subtle for my taste, but it does calms down towards the end. Interestingly, the last sort of cadence is left unresolved, and then it sort of segues into track 8, I'm Sorry, another original. This has got a funky organ riff opening that gets into a R&B feel. And then, Whitaker gets into some fun with the organ here. His tones build things up, and he always keeps it funky on this one. Number 9 is Janine by Oscar Brown Jr., Duke Pearson. This is kind of a Latin number, another new style. Incorporated here. He's got some horns, an arrangement on this, and but he does build a nice piano solo here on an acoustic piano. He kind of gives us a Latin vamp that percussion and horns build over, and then there's a few percussion breaks for fun. On this one, the kind of Latin treatment tune. Number 10, the Duke Ellington, Bob Russell, Don't Get Around Much Anymore. And this features Regina Carter. So a nice, fun, slow swing through this classic tune with acoustic bass and drums, kind of a piano trio. And then added on top of that, Carter's violin. And Carter really milks the phrases here for some really bluesy fun. And so it's a nice treatment of this classic tune in a relaxed tempo, and Carter is featured well here. 11 is kind of a interesting interpretation of the Dave Brubeck tune, Blue Rondo a la Turk. It starts out with the familiar intro, played, as close to the original as you would imagine. And then we get some flute and synth layers that come into the new arrangement. And then there's a real new twist to it with a heavy, slow beat, a syncopated bass, and a funky groove that the flute stalls over for a while. Then Whitaker comes back in on a solo piano break. The funky beat comes back under him. And then there's this kind of bizarre narrative about his life, with starting from his premature birth and then his achievements despite the prognosis that he wouldn't live long or be able to do things. A little bit, I read about his story there first, but these kind of narrative things kind of feature on this album. 12 tune called Trust Me by Richard Smallwood. This is like a live solo piano performance with a gospel feel, a rather short piece. And then that quickly changes into track 13, It Will Be Okay, another original tune. This is like a kind of a cool piece. I like this one. It's a relaxed organ groove, but it's actually like in a 7/4. It's like a 4-beat and then 3-beat kind of interesting rhythm that goes through some different development, and then the groove picks up as it goes on and gets more intense. So this is a kind of interesting organ showcase here. 14, Garden Wall by Roger Guth, Jim Mayer. This is now the album takes another turn into sort of fusion territory. I believe this is a piece from a Dave Weckl album called Master Plan. This is a really synthy fusion piece, but he also gets in an acoustic piano solo on here with some other synth work too. Then the next track, Acceptance, another original tune, which is also kind of, the whole piece is sort of this hypnotic synth groove that has some synth lead soloing over some heavy drumming. So this sandwiched with the previous tune, you're kind of in fusion territory. And then for the final tune, we sort of shift gears to gospel with Charles Gabriel, Sevilla Martin tune, His Eyes is on the Sparrow, solo acoustic piano for kind of this gospel tune, but drums and organ join in midway through and bring it to a climax. So you've got this new talent here, Matthew Whitaker. He's, technique for 20 years old, and all these ideas in various styles is really amazing. In a talent category, he's amazing. However, the recording, I felt, is kind of like, it's a buffet of styles. That's
the album. It's kind of
showing what he can do, but it's a buffet with too much to eat. For me,
I understand. Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. Although I did enjoy I didn't enjoy the whole thing. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
but there were some pieces I really
some things on the plate I really like.
Yeah.
So it's a showcase for him. But the weak point is there's no central musical theme. And I thought the weak points for me are the electronic kind of fusion tunes with the synth. They don't really do much for me because I don't know. I feel like that kind of,
it's hard to get a lot of like feeling out of synth. It's really just a sound.
I feel like that fusion thing is sort of best left in the past. It's just my own personal thing.
So some genius comes along and reinvents it. But we'll have to see.
And then also even on like on the Latin number and some of the other ones, I felt that the production is a bit heavy in some places. I'm sure he sounds great in a live setting, but you can just get the sort of heavy-handed production feel on some of the tunes. But hey, he's only 20 years old, and I wouldn't fault him for any of these sort of decisions that were made in the studio. He's obviously being well promoted. So for me,
he's probably being directed as well. I think.
Exactly.
Why don't you make an album like this? And I think as soon as he goes that Stevie Wonder route and just kind of does what he wants to do and just has like themed albums, we might hear some pretty spectacular stuff.
Oh yeah, because he's got all the tools. So I think for me, he's a young kid with great technique and aptitude in a lot of styles and things. So it'll just be a case of what is he going to focus on? What's going to be his direction? It'll take him some time to figure that out. But I'd like to hear, a release from him, focusing on one thing. Like, is he going to do an all organ album? Well, of course, we're going to like that.
We're going to like that, of course. But even an all piano album, I bet he'd be great. I bet I'd like that a lot too.
Is he going to do?
I like his piano playing.
Yeah, is he going to do something? I think since this is number 3 of his releases,
it's already his 3rd album. He really, he's already done like a calling card record.
But he is young. I mean, and it's kind of strange historically to think of this. So it's super young to think these days. But when you go back to like the 50s and 60s, a lot of the great jazz players, they sort of had their first debuts around the same age. And so there wasn't.
But they weren't leaders, were they? They were playing with someone else.
Sometimes they were, but in their early 20s. But there wasn't this sort of historical palette of styles to choose from.
Right.
But so I think I'll just be interested to see what he chooses. Like, what is he going to focus on? What is his thing going to be? That's what I want to see. Where he decides to, I mean, he'll have to choose something to focus on, and maybe he'll jump around in a variety of styles.
I think about like Chick Corea over the course of his career, solo piano, and then he had his trio, and then he did the Spanish
electric band and all that kind of stuff.
He did some. He wore a lot of hats, and I feel like Matthew Whitaker can do that too. But he's just at the beginning of his career, and just hoping he'll kind of follow that or do that.
Yeah, so he shows that he can do lots of things here, and definitely young jazz cat to watch what direction he's going to go into, because he could go anywhere. It'll just depend what he wants to focus on and what kind of players he surrounds himself with. Right. And I hope he breaks out of this kind of marketed kind of approach thing. Hey, yeah, I don't blame him for doing that and signing up, and I hope he makes a good career financially out of it. I just hope he doesn't get kind of straitjacketed into some sort of production thing, because people know his name from early on. So I hope
the people who know music best are the people who make it. So
yeah, so I hope his creative outlets don't have any sort of barriers put up at an early stage, because he definitely has potential to do lots of things here.
Right. Okay. I thought this was going to be a massively long podcast, but it turned out to be just long.
Just as usual. That's right.
Yeah. So I thought I had so much. I had made like pages of notes over my. Sometimes I'll just write like half a page or a quarter of a page, and today I had like 5 pages of notes. I wanted to talk about these composers. I figured this is going to take forever to get through, but I guess it didn't. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think it's a good length, and we've kept that American spirit, or mostly all-American, almost all-American spirit through this one.
And most importantly, we're back, and we're building up a new wave of momentum here. We're going to be back next week again.
Yeah.
With another theme. I got a theme coming up. See if you can guess. All you Deezer users, see if you can guess what the theme is when I post my 3 recordings.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll look at yours and I'll see if I can
I'm going to tell you what it is, because you're going to have to come up with a title.
I'll have to come up with a title. That's true, too. Yeah. Unfortunately, the title reigns almighty into the download numbers on these. Yeah, you would hope the content.
By the way, if you're out there listening, thinking, oh, they put a lot of work into this, listening to these recordings and doing this long podcast. No, the most work on this podcast goes into deciding what the title's going to be.
Yeah, because that unfortunately influences the download numbers so much, rather than the actual musical selections, which is it kind of saddens me a bit, Yeah. But what are you going to do?
I don't know. I just hope people listen to the music. That'd be cool.
Yeah, listen to the music. That's what it's all about.
All right.
And that's what keeps us going and doing this. Well, we've got lots of things coming up to drive us right through the fall season.
And it's good to be back in the chair with the mics here. This is great.
Back here, and I think we're going to have to do a couple of face-to-face barbecue sessions too coming up.
And before the weather changes.
Yeah, before the weather changes. Yeah.
Better make it quick, because classes are starting. It's going to be the occasions aren't going to be too.
I'll work on that.
Numerous.
We've got the studio equipment to do those things too. So,
right.
So this has been episode 27, almost all-American selection, almost all-American selection of adult music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. And after our summer break, we're back, and we'll be here every week, and maybe more often through the fall, right to the end of the year.
And even through the end of the year, I think we'll probably go on into the new year.
Yeah, with no breaks and extra episodes, and hopefully some new interviews too. So thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe, join, send us a message. Let us know your ideas and reflections on the podcast. And we'll be sure to be back next week with a new theme and new recordings in classical and jazz for you. So until next week, keep listening and check us out on Deezer if you want to hear the recordings before the podcast next week. And if not, we'll definitely be back next Monday with a new episode for you. And until then, stay tuned and keep listening.